Hey gang, here is another video talking on the same subject, I guess, and I hope this will be the last video that I do on the subject of the Constitution of Parliament. Let's hear out the spokesperson of MK Nhlamulo Ndlela being interviewed on Newsroom Africa by Thabo Mdluli.
Speaking now to MK Party spokesperson Nhlamulo Ndlela, who joins us on the line. Nhlamulo, good evening. Good to have you.
Good evening. You sound very distant, so just finding it a bit difficult to hear you.
All right, we're improving that sound. Is it getting better now?
Not necessarily.
Still not? Okay, let's keep trying. So it seems from your papers, I mean, of course, they are in two parts. There's part A and there's part B, but you are largely focusing on part A for part B to be dealt with a little bit later. In part A, you are contending with section 46 and its interpretation, as well as section 51 and its interpretation. One has got to do with whether or not the composition of the National Assembly and the constitution of the National Assembly are the same thing. What's your understanding and your interpretation?
Well, I'll respond, but I could hardly hear what you were asking. But let me just give you my understanding of what you've just asked. If I heard you properly, Thabo, you're referring to section 46 in terms of composition of the National Assembly.
Yeah.
Now, our lawyers will argue that we believe that with Mkhonto weSizwe, in effect, not being part of the sitting of the National Assembly would effectively lead to the below threshold of 350 members of the National Assembly. And I think what is also key to highlight is that, we've been hearing a lot of people talking about, well, Parliament, National Assembly can't sit in a form of a third, meaning 133, to then continue with this business and effectively chorarete.
Yeah.
We're saying that in our papers, we don't believe that's true, because in order for a National Assembly to sit and exist and be duly constituted as per the Constitution, they need to meet the minimum threshold of 350.
Yeah.
And obviously the maximum of 400. Now, with that, you cannot, if you don't have a duly constituted or composed a National Assembly, in our view, then go about the business of the National Assembly. And even if it means you have to, chorarete, you cannot chorarete because, you're not yet duly constituted. So that is the angle, in effect, that you'll have seen in our papers that our attorneys have actually unpacked there.
So you dispute the...
Okay, so you heard what Nhlamulo is arguing. So let's look at the Constitution together. Now, obviously, I would hope you take the opportunity to read this for yourself when you get the time. But I just want to demonstrate to you the folly that is in Nhlamulo's argument. Listen at the composition and election. The National Assembly consists of no fewer than 350 and no more than 400 women and men elected as members in terms of the electoral system that is prescribed by national legislation, that is now the Electoral Act, is based on the National Common Voters Roll, that is the voters roll which has all the names of the individuals who are registered in South Africa to vote, provides for a minimum voting age of 18 years, and results in the general in proportional representation. Do you hear what they're explaining here? They're explaining the process which has already taken place. The process of voting. They are saying the National Assembly consists of no fewer than 350 and no more than 400 women, meaning if during the elections we couldn't get to this number, then we would have no National Assembly constituted. That's the argument. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand this, good people. Nevertheless, the lawyers will go and argue it in court, Msholozi, and the MK will pay a lot of money to come to this conclusion that I'm telling you right now. So, an Act of Parliament must provide formula for determining the number of the members of the National Assembly. Did you hear that? An Act of Parliament. And that's the act that was used. It's called the Electoral Act. That's the act that was used. And what is that act meant to determine? It's meant to determine a formula for determining the number of members of the National Assembly, not candidates, as Nhlamulo is claiming. Okay? And here's the other point. Because Nhlamulo keeps on saying, these are candidates, they are not members of the National Assembly before they are sworn. No. No, 1,000 times no. I hope for those of you who think that Nhlamulo has a point, you are paying attention to what I'm showing you and to what I'm about to show you. Let's go to membership. You see that? Now, membership addresses Section 47(1) and all the others that talks to who is eligible to be a member of the National Assembly, right? So we'll skip that for now. You can read it for yourself, but I want to show you something. Who gets to be sworn in the oath of affirmation? Before members of the National Assembly begin to perform their functions in the Assembly, they must swear or affirm faithfulness to the Republic and the obedience to the Constitution in accordance with Schedule 2. Now, this is very, very important. These guys, either they are not as smart as they purport themselves to be, right? Or they are deliberately trying to plunge this country into something that I do not want to pronounce. The point is, look at what is written there. People, as I've already said, Section 46 is clear. You become a member of National Assembly by reason of the vote which you have gotten. Hence, there is even a formula that will determine whether or not we constitute the 350 to 400. Once you are part of that group, then they use that formula to say, okay, based on the votes received, then Party X will send so many members, not candidates, members. According to their list, they had given us these people. Of these people that are on their list, only 10, meaning the first top 10, goes to Parliament as members that now are going to be sworn to discharge the responsibility of Parliament. This is actually much, much more simple than they are making it out to be. And yes, you will say you heard it from me here, you will confess, and then you come and tell me whether I was right or wrong. But pay attention to what they are saying here. Before members, not candidates, before members of National Assembly. You see, already at this particular juncture, they are called members of National Assembly. How difficult is this, guys? How difficult is this? So there's nowhere where it says in the Constitution, this Constitution of members of National Assembly, that Parliament cannot sit. Then you come to Section 53, which is what he's conflating. Section 53 is very clear, and that is what he claims to have been hearing some people talk about the third and blah, 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 blah. I want to read Section 53. I'm simply reading the relevant sections. You can read from Section 46, as I said in the video that I just posted a few minutes ago. Except where the Constitution provides otherwise, a majority of the members of National Assembly must be present before a vote may be taken on a bill or on an amendment to a bill. Now, what is a majority? A majority of 400 is 50 plus 1. That means 201 members must be present before Parliament can vote over a bill. Do you understand that? At least 1/3 of the members must be present before a vote may be taken on any other question before the Assembly. Do you guys see that? That includes the appointment of the election of the Speaker and their deputy and the President. Any other question before the Assembly. That's why this thing is going to go on Friday, because what they're arguing makes absolutely no sense. Now, let's go back to Nhlamulo Ndlela. Now that I've shown you this, I would have you remember that Section 48 is much more clearer in asserting. As a matter of fact, to me, this is clear as daylight. You have to really think in a certain manner, because what they are doing, they are contorting, they are literally twisting what is written here. Before members of the National Assembly begin to perform their functions. Do you see that? So they are members of the National Assembly before they are sworn in. By the time they are being sworn in, they are members of the National Assembly already. So they don't become National Assembly members by reason of being sworn in. No. 1,000 times no. Let's go back then to the interview.
That the allocation of who's going to that assembly has already been determined by the IEC. And your argument is that those are designated representatives because they have not sworn in, taken the oath, and therefore they are not members. Am I correct?
In effect, that's the view that's coming from our lawyers, that those are candidates. And remember, we've been talking about candidates. that have not been sworn in as members of the National Assembly.
And
where do they get that from? These people wants to teach us law, wants to teach us how to run the country, but they can't read what is clear as daylight. Amazing.
And there are then those of the view that the number doesn't have to be, as you say. There's nothing that would stop those who are there from being sworn in and carrying on with the business, and members of the MK can be sworn in later.
Well, the question is, would the National Assembly be duly constituted and composed? Because if you remove Mkhonto Sizwe, that would effectively lead to 342 seats, which still falls below the threshold. So how would they go about their business to even chorate with a National Assembly that's not duly constituted or composed?
The
National Assembly is duly constituted because the National Assembly is duly constituted according to the Electoral Act. That's what the Constitution is saying. The Constitution is telling you that there ought to be a voters' roll. It's telling you a process how to constitute the National Assembly. Let me show it to you again. You see, composition and election. Did you see that? It says National Assembly consists of no fewer than 350 and no more than 300 men, women and men elected as members in terms of the electoral system that is prescribed by national legislation. That's the Electoral Act, is based on the National Common Voters Roll, provides for a minimum of age of 18 years and results in general proportional representation. Guys, what does that sound like? That sounds like what we did on the 29th. Okay? So they don't have a leg to stand on here. Yes, the answer to Nhlamulo's question is yes, the National Assembly has been constituted. Why? Because when you look, Parliament has 400 members from all the different parties, which makes proportional representation. No one who is under 18 was allowed to vote. There was a voters' roll. The elections were declared free and fair in terms of the prescribed national legislation, which is the Electoral Act. Are you following me? I hope that is clear. Let's go back to Nhlamulo.
The party is
that's the question we're raising here.
Is not removed.
And
it chooses not to participate.
Sorry, what's that?
I'm saying Mkhonto Sizwe party has not been removed. It chooses not to participate.
No, it's very difficult to hear you, Thabo. I mean, I guess the line is
I'm saying, as Mkhonto Sizwe, you have not been removed from the National Assembly. You are opting not to participate out of your own volition.
No, we're saying that we have a serious issue here in a form of the elections, which were rigged. And these elections are not a true reflection of the kind of seats that we ought to be having in the first place. And as we mentioned, based on our submissions of the IEC, there's damning evidence that demonstrate that these elections were rigged. So this was not a free and fair process. And as far as we're concerned, we ought to be having more seats. So, and here's the reality. You can't claim that the elections are rigged and then still participate, off the back of the same elections and the results that came from the same elections which were rigged. I mean, that.
And that's their problem, isn't it? They think that they are law to themselves. They think that just because they claim that the elections were rigged, they ought not to participate in the following process. That is not what is written in the Electoral Act. That's the law that they are now creating for themselves. The Electoral Act is pretty clear in Section 55, the process that you ought to follow. And once you follow that due process and the IEC comes to the same conclusion through a proper investigation, what many people forget is the IEC has got independent auditors here. And it's amazing to me how many people have fallen prey to these lies. This is not the first time we are having election irregularities, but they are always cleared. But we cannot move with the propaganda of individuals that are seeking to put a stain in the entire process for a reason, because, as Jacob Zuma said in a different interview, that he will go to his grave with his hatred towards the Constitutional Court and Justice Zondo, right? He really hates our constitutional democratic established structures, and therefore he is seeking to destroy them. If he is not seeking to destroy them, then they ought to, within 3 days of the elections having been declared, to have lodged a Section 55 complaint. If they have lodged that Section 55 complaint, then the Constitutional Court that they are going to now urgently is going to ask them a question: how far is that process? Because that process should be followed to the T. Only once they are unhappy with that process should they appeal that process to a higher court. If they are, that process has not yet been finalized, they have no reason to interdict this current process. Why? Because what will happen is this: once there is a reconciliation or a revote or a recount, whatever the IEC decides based on the evidence that they claim to have submitted, that would be now at the IEC's disposal, and then the auditors will play their role in terms of the recounts and the revotes and all that, and then indeed they come to the same conclusion with MK, that MK has gotten, let's argue for the purposes of this discussion, that they got 60% instead of the 45% in KZN, then maybe that increases them to 22% or 23%. It makes them an official opposition party. I'm just giving a silly example here. I'm not necessarily now having a calculator here to calculate these numbers for you. Then what will then happen is all of that will be factored into the results of the elections, and the Gazette will be changed accordingly, and the members in Parliament, DA, which is currently the oppositional party, will obviously, if the vote numbers that were rigged were given to the DA, then the reduction will take place. If they were given to the ANC will be reduced accordingly, and then the numbers will be beamed accordingly. And then the numbers of MK in Parliament will be increased. But what MK is asking for is an impossible task of saying, we want you to stop the due process. We want you to stop the constitutional imperatives so as to entertain us, even if we have not followed due process. That, I submit to you, is not going to happen. I've just showed you that, you see, for example, there are claims of the process that has been rigged. If they are valid, they will be followed to the T. But those claims do not equate to their action now that they are taking. The action that they are taking of not going to Parliament and challenging something that is as clear as daylight, now you get to see why are they challenging what is clear as daylight. It's clear how members of Parliament are constituted, how that 350 you get to it. Okay, there is no stipulation in the Constitution that if members recuse themselves, therefore Parliament is not constituted. There is no such a thing. Why? Because members of the National Assembly are constituted by reason of the electorate, the votes which we did, and whoever wins, then they are constituted accordingly. That can be changed if evidence to the contrary has been established and due process was followed, and you get to the conclusion. But what cannot happen is what they are trying to do right now, to say, yeah, but we've submitted this, and because of that, therefore this process should stop. It doesn't work like that. That only works like that if there was a significant rigging of the elections that would change the entire results of the entire votes. And I submit to you, there is no such a thing that is going to happen here. Nevertheless, I would want to hear him out. If there's anything more valid that he would be saying, let's hear him out.
That would be an oxymoron, participating and questioning. No, that's an oxymoron. So the reality is, how is it possible that, knowing very well that the IEC went and made declaration of results in a rush, stating that it was because of the markets? I mean, what happened to the voter of the South Africa's vote? What happened to the South African who legitimately...
Okay, now he just lied through his teeth. I listened to the IEC. You can listen yourself. At no point in time did the IEC say we are declaring these votes because of the markets. That's not true. All what the IEC chairperson said was the responsibility and the obligation that falls upon their institution, that there are so many factors that they have to take into account in declaring elections. But he did not say we are rushing to declare this because of the markets. No. The IEC had 7 days to declare the elections. 7 days. And if MK had followed due process, Section 53 and Section 54 during the elections, then they wouldn't be talking the way that they are talking. MK keeps on trying to get a special treatment. You know, as Thomas Sowell always says, that people who are used to receiving special treatment, when they receive normal treatment and they are treated fairly, like everybody else, they call that an unfair treatment. That's exactly what these guys are doing, because Msholozi is used to getting away with murder and being treated, not literally, of course, figuratively. He's used to getting away with not being taken to task. And now suddenly we have an unfree and unfair elections just based on their assertions. Remember, none of the things that they have claimed publicly have been proven. And we're certainly not going to take their word over a Section 9 institution like the IEC. There needs to be evidence that is proof that is demonstrated in a court of law. And of course, they can appeal if they don't agree with the IEC decision, but the appeal does not necessarily mean the process must be halted, because the process can still be amended later on. I hope that makes sense. You don't create your own rules. You don't get into a football match and create your own rules. And you don't get to change the rules because the game is playing. That's what these guys are trying to do.
Went and voted for a specific party that they wanted represented in government. What happened to those votes? And the thing is, we're raising this issue because we're saying, gone are the days when we as South Africans should be taking things lightly. Why are we so nonchalant about the fact that we are actually wanting to swear people in off the back of a rigged election? Why? What is this rush?
All right, let's.
What about
let's try this. Nhlabulo, I think your volume on your device, because on my side they say they've tried everything to boost my level. Your device volume could be a little bit lower. Try and boost it if you can, so that we can improve audibility. So the question that's been asked, I see by some, is why did you opt not to present that evidence of rigging in this part A of the application?
Why did we opt to not
produce that evidence of the rigging that you are talking about in the part A? Because you say in your papers the evidence will be produced at a later stage.
Well, we are going to produce the evidence. There's nothing more to that. I mean, you can't make claims and not produce evidence. We're saying, in the same way we produced evidence to the IEC, we'll produce evidence in a form of recordings, in a form of documentation, and everything that we have piled up. And here's another important point here. Remember, this is not just objections that were raised by Mkhonto Wesizwe alone. These are objections that were raised by other political parties who also felt that these elections were not free and fair because of a lot of discrepancies that were picked up. And that's the reality of what we're dealing with here. So all that evidence is certainly going to be gathered. It has been submitted accordingly and will be looked at.
I don't know.
Did you guys hear that? All that evidence is certainly going to be gathered. It certainly has been submitted. That does not make sense. The boy is not telling the truth. He's lying through his teeth. And if they had submitted the evidence to the IEC, then the evidence obviously did not stand scrutiny. That is why the IEC went ahead and declared the elections. I would trust the IEC over these individuals on any day. I don't trust these guys. They make a submission to the court and they say the evidence will be submitted later. And you know what they're trying to do? To discredit the very courts, because they're going to go there without evidence like they did with the IEC, and then they create an impression that the courts are not listening to them because they are MK. That's basically the issue here. These people are hell-bent on trying to discredit our constitutional institutions. We should not allow them. And for all of you young people who support MK, listen to in fact, you don't have to listen to anything. Go and read Judge Nugent's report. Remember, Judge Nugent has no beef against Jacob Zuma. Go and read Justice Zondo's report. Remember, Justice Zondo, contrary to what Jacob Zuma wants you to believe, has no beef against Jacob Zuma. As a matter of fact, they were friends for many, many years. Remember that. And Justice Zondo was appointed by Jacob Zuma, if I'm not mistaken, to be a judge. So he has no reason to keep a beef, but just because he has integrity, just like Justice Mogoeng was appointed by Jacob Zuma, yet he found Jacob Zuma to be a constitutional delinquent. You cannot appoint people, and when they are doing their job without fear and favor, then you start saying these people have an agenda against you. It doesn't work like that, good people. Thuli Madonsela was appointed by Jacob Zuma, by the way, for your information. And now suddenly people are saying Umakoti was a Stellenbosch and all the nonsense that I see that people saying with their mouth. So basically, you guys are willing to discredit even your parents just to support Jacob Zuma. That makes no sense to me. I'm sorry. That makes absolutely no sense to me. Nhlamulo doesn't make sense here. They ought to have submitted the evidence. It's clear they don't have the evidence if they must still gather it. And you can't claim to have submitted that which you must gather. This is actually irritating, really irritating if you think about it.
The parties, I won't claim that I've spoken to all of them, but one of those parties is Al Jamaa, and I asked them exactly that question yesterday to say, you were part of those who said there was allegations of rigging in the elections, especially in KZN and some parts of Johannesburg. They said to me yesterday, well, we accepted the response from the IEC that the amount of those votes would be immaterial.
Again, my point. You know, the mere fact that we can take a person's vote, undermine it, trample on it, and say that they are irrelevant or, you know, immaterial. What is that? Is that what we've been reduced to as a society, where we're going to undermine the right of a citizen, legitimate right, for them to choose the party that they want? No. That's what needs to come to an end. And that's what part of this process aims to do. We cannot be taking things nonchalantly, as we always have been. One vote alone is that one vote that disappears is that of a South African whose legitimate right has been trampled on. Yeah. Why must we allow that?
So we
know that in our case, it's not just one vote. We know it runs into hundreds and thousands, let alone millions of votes. What we know, off the back of what happened also in terms of what the system glitch, in effect, if you put it in inverted commas, when that took place. We know what exactly happened there.
So you're basing your
calculation. Technicians that are discussing this to that effect.
Yeah, I'm saying you're basing your calculation on those millions, at least hundreds of thousands, on the fact that there were 579 disputes, and you're saying one of them would have at least constituted 1,000 votes, to the point where the IEC said, let there be a recount, and you're using that as a platform to say you could possibly have 579,000 votes. But are you considering that the voting districts and stations are not necessarily the same? Some might not even carry 1,000 votes.
Again, Thabo, I can't hear you 100%.
Okay, guys, I have to close the video here. And Ndlamulo doesn't make sense. There is a video that I did where I spoke about the issue of statistics. Statistics requires your understanding of mathematics. This is very important. We're obviously not going to have people who do not understand mathematics or statistics telling us about one person's vote. We cannot hold... You see, democracy is a rule of majority. However, it's very, very important for people to understand that when you're talking about spoiled votes, 1.39% or 1.38%, that's out of 16 million. That's more than 1,000 people's votes that were spoiled because those individuals went to exercise their right and they cast their X wrongly, right? So when you talk about exercising of democracy, it does not necessarily mean that everybody is vote. Yes, everybody, each individual's vote counts. However, you cannot say elections were not free. There's no country in the world that would say just because 10,000 people out of 16 million votes. I'm trying to entertain a scenario, to create a scenario here to entertain his theory. If you're saying that 10,000 votes were not counted, right? Okay, how many people voted? 16 million. Okay, which districts were these? Voting districts, VDs were these. Okay, we go to those VDs and say, okay, these 10,000 votes, to which political party do they belong? That's the first thing. So you're going to have to take those 10,000 votes, you allocate them to each political party. This is where then the IEC can come to a conclusion to say the elections were free and fair. Because when you take 10,000 votes and you divide them, for example, amongst the 26 parties that were complaining, then you begin to say that probably, remember I said 26, so you're now looking at about 500 votes per party, right? Can you see that? Because 10,000 divided by 10 is 1,000, right? You see that? So if you've got 26 parties complaining, no longer now what to call 10 parties. You've got 26 parties complaining, and you were to find that on average, each party got about 1,000 votes each. How far does this take Ndlamulo and MK's case? It doesn't take it anywhere. Does it change the price of eggs? No, it doesn't. Does it change the election results? No, it doesn't. Should there be blood shed, or should we really be emotionally hyping people up and saying the elections were not free and fair simply because you missed on 20,000 votes? What evidence do you have that there's 20,000 votes missing from you? Listen to what he's saying, that they have evidence. It may even be up to 1 million votes. Where does he get that from? And why are we supposed to take his word for it? Why was this evidence not submitted in terms of Section 53 of the Act? Why should we entertain a political party that is complaining about our electoral process, but it failed to follow Section 53 and Section 54 of the Act? Even now, they still haven't submitted that evidence in terms of Section 55. Therefore, there's no court in our country that's going to find for them. I want you to see what these people, for what they are. They are trying to discredit our judiciary, our justice system, our constitutionally established structures. That's what they are trying to do. That's what they are trying to do. Now, you may not like Thabo Mbeki. I don't either. However, he makes a lot of sense. He has a video that is 2 hours, 7 minutes, where he delivered a speech at UNISA. And he was using sources that are credible sources that proved, from the Nugent report that I said you should read, to the Research Foundation of South Africa, that proved that Jacob Zuma went out of his way during his presidency to destroy SARS. SARS collects 98% of the revenue for government. If SARS was ever successfully destroyed, that means the thousands, in fact, I think it's about 1 million employees that work for government, from the municipalities, provincial government, as well as national, collectively combined. They all would have lost their jobs because government could not generate revenue. So what am I trying to say to you? It's very, very important for you people to open up your eyes. These guys are into propaganda, and obviously they are being coached by their mentor, which is Jacob Zuma. Do not fall prey for these lies. You can see here in this video that Ndlamulo is not telling the truth. To the extent of the fact that he could say they are still going to collect evidence, but they've already submitted it. I mean, that does not make sense. And no, it's not a mistake. It's not a mistake, because the fact that the document that they've submitted to the court, as Thabo was making reference to, clearly says they haven't submitted that evidence. Remember, by law, they ought to have already submitted that evidence in terms of Section 55. It's not up to them when they are going to submit it. They were supposed to have submitted it within 3 days for it to be heard. The fact that it's still not submitted, it's still going to be collected, that's problematic. Okay, once again, let me love you and leave you. I hope you have seen what the Constitution says. I hope you can see right through these people. Okay? Tell me what you think down below. Is MK Party, as I asked in the previous video, do you think that MK Party is being disadvantaged by the IEC deliberately here? I don't think so. Do you think they're being sabotaged? What is your view? You've heard mine. It took me 33 minutes to tell you my opinion on the matter. What's yours? Okay. Ciao, ciao. Bye.